Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. Right. Ding dong Avon calling. Yes, this is actually quite a serious subject video. But yeah, I saw that. Harry caught on a door cam. Oh my God. I don't know what to make of that. I wouldn't mind betting. I mean, I know the theory, and apparently he said to a housekeeper who didn't have a clue who he was looking for his friend's house. But I wouldn't be a bit surprised, I believe he said that, if in the months to come there'll be some Netflix thing where he will be pretending that he was being chased by murderers and he was frantically ringing on doorbells and knocking on doors to try and get someone to help him, and they wouldn't help him. And he won't include the bit about the housekeeper who didn't know who he was, and him saying the bit about this. That's my theory. That's what I think's going to happen. You'll see. There'll be another Netflix show, won't there? Right, what I wanted to talk about today is I saw this article, and it's all about this lobbying group that campaign and lobby to have the monarchy removed. Now, I'm not suggesting that Harry himself has actually said he wants to do this, but I'll read the article. It's all about how he is a peer of the realm and he can technically force the monarch to give him an audience. That's the nub of what this guy is saying, and the article I'm about to read out to you. Personally, I don't think this has got a cat in hell's chance of working. And if it were, I think it would probably be the biggest mistake of Harry's life. Right, oh, I've lost the bloody page now. Hang on a minute. Chat amongst yourselves. So peer, spelt P-E-E-R, of the realm. Oops. Access to the monarch. Right. And then I'll go to Google News and it's in the Scottish Daily Express. The title is, now, before I read this article, I'll explain something. Years ago, I was doing a law degree via London University, and I dropped out. And the reason, it's so ironic actually, the reason I dropped out was the first year I had to do the 3 C's, criminal, contract and constitutional. Criminal and contract, I'd got them pretty much nailed. Contract was always my least favourite, but I because it was my least favourite, I worked extra hard on my A level, so I had that one fairly well licked. Constitutional I'd never come across before because I didn't cover it in A level law, and that's what made me drop out because I found it very, very confusing. I got all these law books where people are trying to describe what UK, well, England and Wales constitutional law is, and we don't have a written constitution in England and Wales. But there is a constitution, but it's not written. And I've got one author saying, well, this never happens, but it did happen here, here and here. And I've got another author saying, well, no, all the rules can be changed. And I've got another, and I thought, I just can't cope with this. And yet here I am on YouTube talking about little else. What I will say I did learn was that I think all 3 of the authors that I was reading all agreed that the top expert on British, English and Welsh constitutional law was the late monarch. Oh, where's she when Harry needs her? Turning in her grave, I suppose. This headline is the little known royal rule that means King Charles has to speak to Prince Harry if he demands it. Right, hold on to that thought a minute, everybody, because it's a load of bollocks. But, well, I mean, it's technically, I suppose, if I'm going to come to why I think this would be a terrible idea for Harry to do it. The ancient rules of Westminster state that every peer has a common law and constitutional right to ask for an audience of the sovereign. And Harry is a peer, so his father couldn't say no. Very misleading opening paragraph. Then it goes on, Harry claims his father won't speak to him. He lost his appeal. I think he's lost several appeals on that, hasn't he? But a little known constitutional rule, notice the word rule, not law now, states that King Charles would have no choice but to grant an audience with his youngest son if Harry were to demand a word with his father. Well, there's quite a few flies in the ointment on this. Peers of the realm have a legal right of access to the sovereign, and Harry is a peer in his capacity of Duke of Sussex. Documents retrieved from the parliamentary archives by the anti-monarchy pressure group Republic, so hold on to that, Republic, show that this right remains in force. Well, it does and it doesn't, but we'll come to that. Republic's Graham Smith said, and now I see Graham Smith being quoted a lot. He seems to be sort of the lead voice down with the monarchy and all that. And fair enough, everyone's entitled to their free speech. And this guy quite frequently makes a great argument for why the monarchy should not be abolished. But he has his right to say. And he is mischief making here. And I'll explain why. And I think he's laying a trap for Harry himself. Graham Smith said, I imagine that most people would view Charles not speaking to Harry as a family matter, but there are constitutional implications. Harry is a duke and therefore a peer, capital P-E-E-R. In fact, Harry is one of the first people to appear in the role of peerage. I didn't know that, if that's true. Oh, I've got to do this continue reading, and then I've got to accept all the data terms and conditions, and then it wants to show me an advert. And these news websites need to learn to knock all that on the head. It really irritates me. Peers have the right to access the monarch. So if Harry wants to speak to his dad, the Constitution says he must be able to. Well, it's not quite clear on that. You know, it doesn't sort of say, whiny little brat wants security, dad won't speak to him. It can be used for that. No, it doesn't. I haven't managed to find that part. If Charles is refusing to speak to Harry at all, as his media reports appear to suggest, then that would seem inconsistent with the law and the constitution of this country, which I shall come back to. I'm kind of wish I'd pushed on with the law degree now, because although having talked about and watched the royal family for so many years, I'm still pretty much none the wiser. It's not like, to take America as an example, you have amendments in America which are very inflexible. They are your rights. They're kind of written in stone. The impression I got when I was trying to figure out what the English Constitution is all about is the rules can be changed, and it varies depending on circumstance. I suppose some people would talk about the Magna Carta, but well, we have Parliament, you know, and there's been kings, you know, trying to overthrow shit, and then doodahs between monarchs and Parliament, and it's all been resolved and built up over a combination of common law, constitutional law, statute, legislation. There's all. It's a big subject. So I'm very, very impressed. I was very impressed when I read years ago that the late monarch was the leading authority on it. I don't know about Charles because I haven't read any books on constitutional law lately. I might actually order one on councillors of state and start studying that one. What do you think about that? The papers in the archives state every peer has a common law and constitutional right to ask for an audience of the sovereign with a view to tendering advice. Right, now, what's common law? For those of you that don't know, common law, William the Conqueror conquered in 1066, and he basically said, let's just have a general common law. You know, you can't, a bit like the Ten Commandments, you can't kill people. So when people are arrested for murder in England and Wales, they are arrested on suspicion of murder contrary to common law. Theft is another one. It's like all the biggies, they're common law. And then William the Conqueror sent his circuit judges out to, you know, go check on the peasants, make sure they're applying the law. Hence the name circuit judge. That much I have got licked. So why would a peer have the right, and this is an ancient right, to have an audience with the monarch? Well, as I said before, it ain't so they can whine about security. They have a right to ask audience of the sovereign with a view to tendering advice. Well, do you think the monarch needs Harry's advice on anything? A guy that's just been caught on a door cam, running up and down a street, ringing doorbells, who's just blown away 1.5 million on an appeal that was doomed to fail from the beginning. On a guy, his choice of marriage. You know, is there anybody out there who thinks that the monarch needs the Duke of Sussex to demand an audience in order to give him advice? Now, let's just say there's someone out there who says, yeah, Harry might actually be better king. I'm sure there are people. In fact, I've seen him on X. Does that person think Harry would actually say to the king something like, oh, I'm devastated about the state of the country. I want to give you advice on this, that, and that. Or do they think Harry might say, I'm very worried about your government, your majesty, you need to be aware of this? Or do they think he's going to go, daddy, daddy, me, I want money, 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 security, security, which has got FA to do with the state of affairs of being a monarch. Now, again, I repeat, Harry has not himself said he's going to do this. And as I've also said, this Graham guy, I think he's playing mischief. I think he's actually trying to put ideas into Windsor's head, because if Windsor were to apply for this, it would hit the headlines massively. And it would make not only an excellent argument for this Graham guy to say, down with the monarchy, Harry's a privileged peer, he's abusing his power. It would also make an excellent argument for Harry to be stripped completely of every single title, right, everything, be off. So if you're watching Windsor, be careful of this guy. He is not your friend. He must do so individually and singly. Well, there's another fly in the ointment, because he'd have to ask Meghan's permission, wouldn't he? Or it'd be her idea in the first place. But he need not employ the medium of the Secretary of State. For goodness sake. So sorry. There's literally nothing in front of that police car. There's literally nothing. Never mind. And Stubbs' constitutional history states, the only other important right of peerage is that of demanding right of access to the sovereign, a privilege which every peer has, which ordinary subjects has not, and which members of the House of Commons can demand only in the company of his fellow members, with the Speaker at their head. Smith added, of course, in a sensible society that separates family feuds from the workings of national institutions, this wouldn't be an issue. But the monarchy isn't sensible, it's nonsensical, in his opinion. That doesn't mean, however, that we should allow the royals to ignore the UK's constitution when it doesn't suit their private concerns. What it does mean is that we should separate the royal family and its internal squabbles from the workings of Britain's political system. Well, as I said a couple of times, he's a mischief maker, isn't he? Now, it is possible that PR people, puff people, think that's a good idea. It is possible Harry could try that one. I mean, it would be, he's already appealed to no less than the Prime Minister, no less than the Home Secretary, no less than the Royal Courts. He's given a TV interview, which I think I've established now was basically that BBC interview was talking to his father. This guy has now come up with another avenue for Windsor to there's no other way to fuck up again, potentially, and make a fool of himself, as if the door cam wasn't bad enough. And I mean, that was bad. I mean, when I showed my Ben, he just laughed. He was... Anyway, getting back to Harry's constitutional rights as a peer. And I'm by no means a leading expert on this. I mean, I actually never heard of this before. I dare say people like Lady C know exactly. But apparently it hasn't been, this peer demanding to see the monarch, I think I read somewhere, that hasn't actually happened since about 1640. So if Hazza were to go down this road, oh, I can see the headlines now. And I think if he were to do this, that would be the kibosh. Complete, finish, game over. I mean, it's becoming ever more likely he is going to be stripped of all of his titles. Oops, battery dying, so I'd better wrap this up. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments. I have seen the memes of Harry trying to sell his wife's sloppy jam spread, door-to-door salesman. I've seen all the jokes. I've read the comments on the Daily Mail. They're hilarious. And it's kind of begging for it. But on a last note, I will say, just remember that I said, if a Netflix thing comes out later, a different scenario, a different version of events, and it will be how he was running for his life and desperately banging on doors to try and get someone to let him in because there was a murderer in the street. Where his bodyguards are and stuff, I don't know. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. Battery dying. Look forward to seeing your thoughts and opinions in the comments below.